We are honored and grateful to be gathered here today on their traditional lands.
Thank you, Joan.
Thank you, Joan.
Yeah, so welcome everybody. In just a few minutes, Bonnie will pick up the ball and talk about fruit tree pruning and diseases and a section on citrus. And I wanted to mention something real quick because we talked about irrigation last week. And we heard about a situation where a woman had come in with pictures of citrus trees that looked pretty sad, and the initial idea that it was overwatering. And some of the symptoms of overwatering and underwatering can look pretty much the same. But in this instance, in looking at it a little closer, it was clear that one, the leaves were dull and they were cupping, they were folding. And so that's pretty much a symptom of underwatering. And then when she said she only had one small drip ring that she ran periodically, it was pretty clear that was the problem. But we wanted to say something about overwatering because it can be a problem. But what is really more than too much water is too frequent water. So that's something to look for. I mean, you could probably put 100 gallons of water on a tomato and it would use up 2 gallons. But if you put on water on a tomato every day, then you're going to cause problems. So that's the thing to watch out for in irrigation is too frequent. And I think what we tried to say was, every 2 weeks to every month for watering most fruit trees. So, okay.
Okay.
With that, Bonnie, it's all yours.
All right. Thanks, Mike. Hi, I'm Bonnie Berman. Going to talk a lot about fruit trees. I have so much to cover. I may go a little fast, but I will make sure I cover everything, and the slides will give you a lot of detail. So, oops. There we go. So if this is helpful, here's just a couple links. If you want to just do a screenshot or take a picture with your phone, these are some just useful links to have if you don't already have them. And then a book that I highly recommend is The Home Orchard by Chuck Ingalls, who was a prior Yolo and Solano County farm advisor. So training your tree. We talk about pruning, but pruning is actually a means of training your tree. And all trees really benefit from a good structure. And so you're going to start there. Your tree may be tall, it may be short, but as long as it has a good structure and branches to hold the fruit, that's what you're looking for, because you want to the worst thing in a fruit tree is to have a branch break, have a limb break, and then there goes your fruit. And so you're looking for balance. So I'm just going to explain a couple of these little things, and then it'll make sense why I'm suggesting them as we go. So your foundation is just to develop a good structure of these foundation branches. You want good light penetration as well. So allowing the sunlight to get deeper into the canopy of your tree keeps the buds that develop fruit active for a longer period of time. So allowing some sunshine to penetrate as it moves across the horizon is very healthy for your tree. And allowing that light in also allows airflow. If you have a tree that has a really dense canopy, it's more inviting to insects. It's going to dry out a little more slowly when we have mist or fog or rain. And that moisture can lead to fungal diseases. So allowing your tree to dry out more quickly by having more airflow through the tree makes it less susceptible to all of those fungal diseases. You can also control your tree, the size of the tree, by pruning or training it. You may want a short tree, so it's easier to harvest. Of course, it's easier to spray if you need to spray something on the tree, or to get into to thin, and of course to harvest. So you want to allow your tree not only to be not too tall, but it's helpful if you can kind of get into the tree a little bit. So you can fit your body inside the center and then pick or thin or whatever you need to do from the inside. Making cuts also can help renew the fruiting wood, which is particularly important for peaches and nectarines, and I'll mention that a little later. When you're pruning, you want to remove the 3Ds, so anything that's dead, anything that's damaged, and anything that's diseased. So you're going to take all of those out, cut them whenever you see them. And then as a bonus, if your tree is smaller, it's going to need less water. And if it's near a patio or something, you'll have less of an issue of invasive roots. So um, most people have heard that you do your pruning in the wintertime, and that's because it's easy to see what you're doing. It's also becoming very common and recommended to do pruning in the summer. And that's when your tree does a lot of its growth. So your tree suddenly often will have long shoots going straight up in the air. That's all this new growth. It's vegetative growth, so there's no fruit on it. And in the springtime, it's so much easier to cut those out. The branches are thinner, they're green, your loppers can cut them. And those same branches, if you wait until wintertime, they've started to harden a little bit. They're much thicker, and sometimes you need a saw. It just makes it much, much harder. So if you prune, once or twice in the summertime, when those branches are thinner, it's just so much easier. And then particularly if you have apricot or cherry, it is recommended to prune those only in the summertime because they are susceptible to a fungal disease that if you're making cuts in a season when it's moister, in the winter or the early spring when we might have a rain or some dew, it can help the fungus spread. So by pruning those in the dry season, it's healthier for the tree. And then, of course, if you are pruning in the summertime, you just want to be careful that your tree doesn't get sunburn. So you want to be thoughtful about not pruning too much in the summer and opening up areas that can burn. And I've got a picture of what sunburn looks like in a fruit tree in a few slides. And then also you want to make sure you're watering them. Okay, so this is a picture. The before picture shows that growth I was talking about. So all of those branches going straight up in the air, up this way, all of those are all new. And then after a cut, you just cut all of that off. And the goal you're looking for is to allow a little bit of that sunlight to get deeper into the tree. Because as I mentioned earlier, it keeps the fruiting buds more active. So what you're looking for is creating some dappled shade on the ground. And that means that the sunlight is penetrating all the way through the tree to the ground. And it's healthier for the tree because it'll just make it more fruitful for a longer period of time. Because the fruit will be able to develop lower in the tree, which is also easier for you to harvest. I'm just going to talk just a minute on the flowering buds. So I've been talking about these fruiting buds where where the trees create their fruit, but they don't all do it the same way. So if you have a peach or a nectarine, if you have one in your yard now and you go outside and look at it, some of the branches you're going to see are brown, and then there'll be these green shoots coming out of them. And that green growth is what's growing now. And next year, it's going to harden and you'll have fruit on that green growth. So if you're making cuts on your peach and your nectarine, and I'll talk about how cuts can stimulate more growth. If you're stimulating more growth, you'll have more of those green shoots so that the next year you'll have fruit on them. So peaches and nectarines do benefit from a little more pruning because of the way they fruit. The other fruits, apples and pears, cherries, apricots, plums, and almond, they more commonly fruit on something called a spur or a very short shoot. And these are buds, they're flower buds that remain active year after year, provided they get a little sunlight, so that every year you'll get fruit in more or less the same place. So you don't want to cut too much on those trees because if you are, you're cutting off those buds that will be providing you fruit next year if you leave them on. So for these trees, for the apple, the pear, cherry, apricot, plum, almond, you're really pruning for size. So you're pruning to keep it smaller. You're pruning to keep it in check so it's not growing into the neighbor's yard or whatever. But you're not so much pruning it to get more fruit. whereas you are doing that a little bit with the peach and the nectarine. You're pruning for size also, but you'll get a little more fruit. And then on the bottom, I put a note, some trees, it doesn't, they just fruit on the growth that's happening. So for fig, citrus, avocado, persimmon, quince, and pomegranate, it doesn't matter whether you prune it or not, any new growth you're going to get, they fruit on that new growth. So those, you're really also just pruning them for size. You're just trying to keep your fig tree so it's not 30 feet. And pruning it isn't going to create necessarily more fruit. It's going to get a lot of fruit because it fruits on the new growth, the current growth. Okay. And these are just nice pictures of buds. Okay. Did someone have questions about that? That was a lot.
No questions yet.
Okay, awesome. Okay, so these are the general pruning tools. You want to wear gloves. And from left to right, you've got your pruning shears. Those are for things that are about the size of a pencil. We're moving on to your loppers. That's for something that's maybe 3/4 of an inch, maybe to an inch, depending on whether the wood is really hard or whether it's still green. And then there's some pruning saws. The red one is a collapsible pruning saw. The other one is not. And then the last saw is a pole saw, and it has the blade, and then it also has a hook here that when you pull the string, a blade comes up and it cuts similar to the way a lopper does. So depending on the size of the limb, you want to adjust the tool that you're using. Ideally, it's good if you can keep your tree low enough so you don't need to frequently use the pole saw. But if you are just trying to get some of those thin limbs in the summertime, it is pretty easy to just hook this little bit over the limb and cut it off just standing on the ground. So you're just bringing everything lower. And then this little piece over here, this is a sharpener. You can buy them at the hardware store, and they're very helpful to clean only the straight blades. You wouldn't put them on a saw just before you start your pruning in the season, and then maybe a little later in the season if they've started to dull a little bit. You can also use them on a shovel, a trowel, all kinds of things. So this is a useful little tool to have. So pruning cuts, there's different kinds of pruning cups. There's really only two kinds. And if you can master those two kinds, then you're just set. The first is a thinning cut. And you can see here where there was a branch, and then the cut was made right over the intersection with another branch. And when you're doing that, you're removing growth. All this growth is being removed, and any new growth is going to continue along this branch and keep going this way. So when you do a thinning cut, you're taking growth away, and you're really using it to redirect the way the plant or the tree is growing. So if it's growing, into a window and it's covering a window, if you do a thinning cut, it will redirect the growth. So the growth is going around the window or a different direction. A heading cut does the opposite. A heading encourages more growth. And a heading cut is when you have a stalk and you just cut it in the middle of the stalk above a bud. And when that happens, this bud will begin to grow. And then this picture doesn't show it, but there's probably a bud here, and there's probably a bud down here, and a bud down here. And all those buds will shoot up, so that by making that cut, you'll suddenly get a big flush of growth here. So with that same example, if you have a branch growing over a window and you made a heading cut by mistake, instead of clearing things away from the window, you've now encouraged, 3 or 4 more branches to grow in front of that window. So just think about the kind of cut you're making. Again, a thinning cut, you're going to go all the way back down to where it intersects with another branch. And a heading cut, you'll be able to see the buds on the branch, and you're just going to go down and cut above a bud. And it's similar to rose pruning, if you're familiar with that. And then the bud that is closest to the cut will be the dominant bud. And so you'll get a branch going the direction that bud is facing. So if you're wanting to direct the growth, you'll cut above a bud that's pointing the direction you want it to go. So that's pruning. This is what you don't want to happen. And clearly this is a really big branch. So the way to avoid that, if you are cutting a really big branch, you can see the example over here. This is a thin branch and you can use your loppers for it. I mean, this is big. It makes it look really big here, but pretend this is only about the width of a pencil, right? You're going to use this and you're just going to cut it off. But if it's much thicker, you're going to make 3 cuts. And your first cut is an undercut. And it's not where you want your final cut to be. It's going to be further out from the tree. And you're going to just do an undercut. And that's, you'll see, that's to prevent stripping the bark like that other picture. So you just do your undercut. Your second cut is going to be past it, further out from the tree. And you're going to cut off all that weight. So, you know, this branch is going to keep going. It's got like, I don't know how many pounds on it. It's got all these branches and leaves and everything. And you're just going to cut all that weight off. And then you're just left with this little stub here and then a big bit here. And then it's really easy where you can take your time and make a clean cut, but not going into this bulge here, which is the branch collar. So to show you on, you guys can see my cursor, right? I'm hoping. Anyway. So here you'd make your first cut over here, your second cut here where you're taking all of the weight off, and then your third cut you're going to make over here, not into this branch collar, because this branch collar is full of cells that are going to grow and seal off the wound. And this is a picture of what that looks like. So this was the branch collar all around here, and the cells are growing and filling in that hole. And over time, it'll be completely full, and it'll just be like a bulge on the tree. And that's to prevent, you know, ripping the bark off the tree with a bad cut. Okay. These are some other techniques. If you don't want to make a cut, you can direct the growth of your tree using spreaders. You can make them out of wood. You can buy them out of plastic. You can use other sticks and just tie them on with yarn or twine or something, just to direct the growth of the tree, maybe away from something, or maybe they're two really close together and you want to spread them out. These are other ways to do it. You can use weights. And then once, you know, if you leave it on for a year, the branches will harden and they'll stay, and then you can take them off. And then some other options if you really want things bent down. It is important to know that your goal is like a 45 or 60 degree angle. If the branches are going straight up in the air, they're mostly going to be just leaves. And if they're going horizontal or down, they're not going to produce as much fruit. They're the strongest. They have the strongest attachment, and they do the best balance for fruit and leaves if they're at an angle. So back here, what you're going for is just that angle. So if these were all pointing straight up, you would get this dense bit here of just leaves. You wouldn't get a lot of fruit. But by pulling them all out a little bit like that, you're allowing the sunlight in, you're opening it up for airflow, and you're creating a stronger, at the crotch of the tree, stronger connection points so you can get more fruit. So that's the goal here. Okay. Were there questions about that? That was a lot of stuff.
No questions.
Okay, cool. So this is, I was going to tell you about sunburn. So this is what sunburn looks like on the tree. And you want to look for areas that are they're going to be facing west or south, because that's where our hottest sun is. So if you see that, if it's already happened, you can still treat it. And to treat it, you'll mix an interior house paint that you have, interior latex paint, half and half with water. And you just want to take a light color that you maybe already have. I'm in my daughter's room. It's light green. I could take a light color, mix it with water, and then you would paint it right over. And it just helps reflect the sun to prevent it from getting worse. There may, if you're close up in here, there's probably little teeny holes in this where boring insects have already gone in there. But what you're doing is just preventing it from getting worse, especially if it's a major scaffold branch. If it's a smaller branch, I would cut it off. But if it's a major branch and it's got like all healthy stuff out here and healthy stuff out here, then I would go ahead and paint it. And you can paint right over the buds. You just paint the whole thing. And hopefully over time, some of these branches that are healthy will grow up enough that they'll have leaves that will shade this out a little bit so that it'll be in the shade and not completely in the sun. And then this is the Eutypa. It's the fungus that only affects the apricots and the cherries. So hopefully you don't experience it, but if you do, this is what you're looking for. If you make a cut, it makes this wedge of rot. That's kind of a telltale sign. And then you'll get whole sections that just kind of die like that. There's just two styles. This is the more open vase style, and then this is a central leader where you have a single branch, but because things are kind of balanced this way, you're still getting airflow and sunshine. And this is over time. This is the first year, so it was cut low. 3 buds, or actually 4, I think there's one this way, were kept, and then they would grow out. So maybe there was a bud here, there was a bud down here, and another bud lower, and they all grew out into branches. And so you've got this opening, and then all of these will develop leaves and branches, and some will shade. And then over time, this is what it looks like. So it's really easy to get in there. It's short. It'll keep going. These branches were going to go way like off the page. It's just an easier to manage a tree when it's in this shape. Another option is to do a 4-in-1 or maybe a 3-in-1, but this is advanced gardening. You'd use the same exact techniques of wanting more open in the center, but these are all going to compete. So, for resources, for nutrients, for water, for sunlight, everything. So you want to make sure that the one that is maybe the weakest is in front, so it gets the most access to sunlight and doesn't get shaded out. But the idea behind it is that you can have maybe 4 varieties of peach or nectarine that maybe ripen at different times, so that you have fruit for 3 months instead of 1 month. And it's a good use of space if you don't have a lot of space. But it is tricky. It's very likely that one will die. But it is worth a try if you have the space and you want to try it. But they need more attention. You need more careful pruning, water, because you've got 4 plants you're watering there. But yeah, something fun. You can also do espalier. That's just, you can do with, these are pears. This is a fig. This looks like a cherry. You can espalier citrus. The primary thing to think about is sunburn. So I wouldn't espalier on a west-facing wall. And if you are worried about sunburn, or if it's already there, then you'd paint. You would paint some light-colored 50-50 with water on the branches to protect them from sunburn. And then when you're buying trees, I just was going to show this because I thought it was neat. Often you get your trees bare root. They're just kind of packed in sawdust. You get them at the nursery. Or you buy them a little bit later and they're in a container and they've got leaves. Another option that's somewhat new is this membrane. And so you would buy the tree while it already has leaves on it, and the membrane just decomposes. So you just plant it in the membrane, and it's supposed to reduce transplant shock. And I don't know how many places are carrying them. I know at the winter's library sale that they have each year, I think it's in January or February, they I think the majority of their trees were in a membrane pot this year.
Mm.
But it is just something kind of fun, there's nothing wrong with the tree. It's just a different way to present it. And then strategies for pruning a neglected tree. Um, you there's a lot. I mean, because we've just talked about what you want for your tree, you can identify a tree that's been neglected. Likely it's overgrown, it doesn't have strong scaffold branches. So you're just going to take your time and think about what needs to happen to keep it healthy. What you can do is just cut it back by decide what your ideal height is if it's too high, and then divide that by 3. So if you want it to be 9 feet, and it's 18 feet right now. So 9 from 18 is 9. So the first year you would cut it about 3 feet. The second year you would cut it, 3 feet more. And then the last year you would cut it 3 feet more, so down, so that you're down to 9 feet. It sounds good in theory. It is hard. You just want to make sure it's a tree that you really value and enjoy the fruit, and you want to do that. And so maybe just take some time to really think about how you want to do it carefully. And then thinning fruit, yes, 100%. You should thin. Lots of critters like to hide in the tight spots. Here, if you're picking a bunch of these, there might be some earwigs in there or other things. So it's really helpful to thin. The rule for thinning is based on the size of the fruit. So apricots are smaller, so you want to thin about every 4 inches between fruit. For bigger fruit, for large plums and apricots and peaches, you want to do 6 inches between each fruit. And what you could do is just start at the end of the limb, leave one, figure about 6 inches, and pull everything in between. Save that one, go another 6 inches, pull everything. And, so you kind of have these limbs, and you'll see how your tree suddenly bounces back up and it's not hanging, and you don't need, supports to hold the branches so that they don't hit the ground or don't break. And it makes for, it's really good for a lot of reasons. It allows the fruit to get really big and sweet on the tree, because the nutrients aren't being shared by huge quantities of fruit. So you don't have a bunch of tiny little fruit. You have bigger, sweeter fruit with nice color. Also, it makes it less likely that your tree will develop something called alternate bearing, where it'll have a whole bunch of fruit, and that'll suck up all its resources. And the next year, it needs to recover, so it doesn't have very much fruit. So the best way to prevent that is to thin, so that you get kind of steady levels, more or less, of fruit. So thinning is a good thing. Okay, now citrus. Okay, anything before we go into citrus?
No questions.
Okay. Okay, so citrus are evergreen, so they're different from the other trees we were talking about. Citrus you really only prune for size. They do not require pruning to make them better for, you're not going to get more fruit because you pruned it, or the fruit isn't going to be sweeter because you pruned it. You're really just pruning for size, and you want to keep it about a foot off the ground because that discourages insects from crawling up into the leaves. You do want to think about when you're pruning it, when you do it, you want to do it before the buds. Hopefully you don't still have fruit on the tree. If you do, you want to try to pick what you can before you're doing the pruning, or you want to do it after it's flowered. And then, of course, not in the wintertime, because anything that if you cut and you do get some new growth in the wintertime, that new growth is just going to freeze, our first frost, and it'll die. So it's better not to prune in the wintertime. So citrus want to be a shrub. That's their tendency. Often you'll see them trained as a tree, which is fine, but you want to make sure you protect the trunk by painting it so it doesn't get sunburned. They do need nitrogen. So I didn't talk a lot about fertilizer, because most of the other trees in our area don't need a lot of fertilizer. Our soil is really rich, but nitrogen is something that the citrus need. They're evergreen, they're using a lot of it, and it's water soluble. So you do want to apply it. There's different ways to do the nitrogen. Um, Primarily, make sure that you are reading the instructions on the package. If you're getting a slow release, that means that you put it in and it slowly is used up by the tree. Just look, and usually it'll say to apply it in January and February, and then again in maybe May or June, something like that. But just follow the instructions, apply the amount it says based on the size of your tree. If you're doing a quick release nitrogen, same thing goes. Just make sure that you water it in properly and just apply it, because too much can attract a lot of insects, which is not what you want. And it can also cause the leaves to burn. So just be thoughtful. Yeah. And then I've got to plant on a southern exposure, because even though it doesn't seem like we're getting frost, we do get some frosts. And there are microclimates, so your area may or may not get more frost. So this is a tree in a pot. Because they're evergreen, they're always sold in pots. You'll never find a bare root orange. Again, ideally you want to plant it in wintertime. So that's like the healthiest, late winter, so it's not getting a frost. And what else? Oh, there's a list of ones that are cold tolerant, if that's helpful. Irrigation, just like Mike was saying earlier, it's not you're not going for frequent water, you're going for infrequent water, but really deep water. And last session, someone was talking about the kumquat that was flowering and didn't bear any fruit. And I have the same experience. And I went to Redwood Barn and talked to them. And he was saying that really the only thing he could think of is that it needs a really deep water. Really get the water down like 2 feet. So leave the hose on low overnight so that the water just really soaks in, and do that before the flowering so that that water sink is there when the tree needs it, when it's trying to produce flowers and then develop fruit. Yeah, and of course young trees are going to need more water because their root system isn't as developed. So they're going to need more fruit, twice a week, really good water, because their roots aren't 2 feet down yet. I mean, they're it's brand new. Again, I mentioned applications of nitrogen. This is kind of a calculation, but really you just need to look at the fertilizer, at the directions of what you're getting, because there's lots of different kinds, lots of different products out there. This is what nitrogen deficiency looks like. So see that yellow? And that's when you are going to need to apply some. They grow great in pots, so that's an option. Anything in a pot, though, is going to need more water and more fertilizer. So think about that if you're going to make that choice. Leaf miners are very common in citrus. They're not the end of the world. It's a tiny little insect that is, the larvae are in between the layers of the leaf, and they make these little tunnels. And there's not much you can do. You don't need to pick all the leaves off. It's really, as it says here, natural enemies are the best preventative tool. And eventually the trees become less susceptible to them. The Asian citrus psyllid, you've probably heard about the citrus greening. It's really horrible. It's a big deal in Florida right now. It's not so bad here. And what I wanted to say is that there is a biocontrol now. It's a predatory wasp that was found by UC Riverside researchers who are working in Pakistan, because Pakistan has citrus and a similar climate to that of some areas of California. And this is the natural predator of the citrus psyllid. So they brought them back, and as of 2022, they've released over 23 million of them. Wow. So fortunately, it doesn't look like citrus greening is going to be a game changer for California, as it is, I think, for Florida right now. But if you do feel that you have it, this is what it looks like. You get this weird mottling on the leaves, and then the fruit is really odd looking if you cut it in half. So that's what to look for if you think you have that. And then you would report it right away to the pest hotline, which is right here. And then this is not citrus greening, just to tell. So this is the nitrogen I just was showing you. Zinc and magnesium are trace nutrients. So if you're giving straight nitrogen to your tree, then they're not getting any of those other nutrients. So you might think about then switching to something that maybe some kind of fertilizer that includes other trace minerals in it for your tree. And avocados, yes, you can grow avocados. The big thing here is just it has to be a Mexican variety. So Hass is not Mexican, Hass is Guatemalan. But there's so many other Mexican varieties that will grow here. They're just hardier. You definitely want to whitewash the trunk. Just paint the trunk like we talked about earlier for sunburn. The roots are really shallow, so you don't want to plant anything underneath it. Same goes for citrus. You don't want to plant under them either. They have shallow roots, and they also need a balanced fertilizer. So similar to citrus a little bit. Okay. Oh, yes, and definitely right here, the California Rare Fruit Growers is an awesome site if you haven't already looked at it. It says everything you need to know about avocados, plus all kinds of crazy other amazing fruits that you can try to grow in California. Okay, and then we're moving into pest management. So this is awesome. Okay, any questions before we get into pests? Okay, I'm going to take that as a no. You can all hear me, right?
Wait,
Are
Bonnie,
there questions? Yes.
there is a
I don't.
question.
Okay.
Okay.
Is there a good ref for pruning lemon trees?
A good what for pruning
Re
lemon?
reference.
Oh, I am not thinking of a Mike, do you know a good citrus pruning resource? It's mostly for size. So and then using the same techniques of using the thinning cuts if you want to remove the branches, or a heading cut if you need to encourage growth in a particular area. Mike, do you know of, I'm not familiar with the
Yeah, I mean, I pretty much say the same thing. It's what I do to my lemon trees, but I don't know.
Yeah, I would look on the
Yeah, I don't
website.
think you might look for just a reference on pruning citrus in general, and there's
Yeah,
probably some things online. If you are looking online, start with either UC or another EDU kind of site, because there's a lot of
yeah,
stuff out there that's
yeah.
not very
You
good.
also, you know what, perhaps Google Four Winds Nursery. They do a
Good idea.
lot of citrus, and they have a lot of resources on their site and YouTube's. So Four Winds Nursery, and they'll have some videos on pruning that they're very reputable. They come and speak to the master gardeners on a regular basis. We connect with them. So that's, I guess that would be my recommendation.
Yeah, and I think they're in winters still, are they?
I don't know.
They were. So anyhow, their advice would be, area appropriate,
Mm,
not Florida.
yeah. Oh, was there another question or should I continue?
That's it.
Okay.
No, there's one
So,
Oh,
more.
wait. There's one
oh,
more. Is insecticidal soap help to get rid of squash bugs, or is neem oil better?
well, the difference, neem oil is an organic, and insectis and like horticultural oil is petroleum based. So that's kind of the difference between them. They're pretty similar. I would look specifically for that on the IPM website, which I think is right here. Well, yeah, so this is the IPM website, ipm.ucdavis.edu. And then I would put in stink bugs or You know what? I do have a slide on the leaf-footed bug, but I don't know that I don't think it recommends a specific oil.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
the question is to insecticidal soap, which I think is generally also organic,
Mm,
isn't it? Yeah. I mean, you're right about the uh, petroleum-based oils, the dormant oils often, but um, I don't think, yes, look on IPM because I don't think either one of those is going to kill a squash bug. That's kind of the bottom line.
yeah.
Yeah.
So, okay. And then when I get to the leaf-footed bug, which is in the squash bug family, let me see what that's. Yeah. Um, so the peach leaf curl, you guys, anyone who has a peach or nectarine has probably experienced it. It only affects those kinds of trees. And it's really if we have a moist spring that you're going to get um, a bad case of it. And you don't need to pick the leaves off. They're going to fall naturally. And then the issue with it isn't so much the fungus affecting the fruit, it's just the energy that it saps out of the tree by having to regrow new leaves. So it just put out all these new leaves, like expended all this energy, and then they all shrivel up and fall off, and then it has to start over again. And by now, like it's starting to warm up a little bit. So it kind of gets the tree behind. So it's not going to kill the tree. I mean, it can kill a young tree, so that's more of an issue. An older tree, it's not a problem. Usually it'll just leaf right out again and it's just fine and it's chugging along. But that's really the issue with the peach leaf curl. You can spray. There's copper products that you can use, but you have to look carefully when to do it. In our area, you would do it in early spring. Um, I know there was recommendations of doing it like 3 times or doing it just twice. But really for our area, if you just get it really good in the early spring, there's some great information. They updated the peach leaf curl IPM page. So you can look at that and it has examples of specific kinds of that you can use, sprays. Um, so I thought was nice that that's been redone because that's an issue everyone's got. Yeah, and the brown rot was really bad this year, I think. If you got any of those mummies on your peaches or nectarines or that was all the brown rot. And that also had to do with the moisture that we had this spring. And it causes gumming and it rots the fruit. So like this, you guys probably saw some of these. I know I had a bunch on my peaches and nectarine, but there were plenty of other fruit that was fine. So just make sure you pick all those up, rake up all the stuff, um, because that is what's going to hold those spores over. So that's the best way to deal with it. You can try to, if you're planting a new tree and you don't want to have to deal with this, try something that blooms later. And by that, maybe we've already had the rain by the time it blooms. But I mean, we don't know what's happening with our climate really. So you could try that, and then we're going to start getting rains later. I don't know. But just that's an option for you. Fire blight is also something that many people are familiar with. It only happens to apples and pears, and it looks like a small branch has been torched. And the main issue here is just removing it when you see it. You're going to cut it off. You're going to make sure you disinfect between your cuts. You're going to just mix some bleach with some water. So it's 10% bleach. And rather than going back exactly like 12 inches or 18 inches or whatever, you're going to look at where it connects, where the intersection is with other branches, and you're going to go back at least 2 because it can be very vigorous. It's growing on the inside of the branch. And if you were to cut it open, you would see the brown on the inside. And if you've got a young tree that's growing really fast, the disease can spread really quickly. If it's an older tree, and it's kind of slowed down, then the disease is probably moving more slowly. Um, so what you're trying to do is get ahead of it. So you're gonna, look, it went to this point, and then you're gonna go down to the next intersection and cut below that because you just want to eradicate it from inside the branch. You also can try less susceptible varieties, and there are some, and I think they're listed really quickly. Codling moth is another one that affects apples and pears and quinces. Um, it's always been, well, you could just eat around it. But there are some options. There's actually some really good options now. Like you see here, you get more damage when it's hot than when it's mild. And you can spray, or you can do the bags. These are the bags where you just make a cut and you slip it over the apple or the pear when they're really tiny, and it'll grow inside. And that way, when the larva crawls out, let's see how that works. It prevents the cycle. It disrupts the cycle because it's a moth that lays an egg that then develops into a larva that then crawls out. But what I wanted to show you is that there's this new stuff that I just was reading about called CYDX, and it's a biological insecticide. So this is the concentrate. It's a liquid that suspends this insecticidal virus. And you only need, I mean, this container is for someone who has an orchard. So you do the whole orchard. I was reading an article about a man who just did it for his backyard, and he did the calculation. He only needed like between 2 and 5 drops. And you mix it with water and you spray, and it kills only the codling moth larva. It doesn't affect humans. It doesn't affect other insects. It's really specific, and it's the OMRI. It's considered an organic option. So I thought that was really exciting. The downside is that it's really expensive. The cheapest I found it was $165 for this little container, which is like 6 ounces. But if you find like neighbors that want to go in on it with you that have apples or pears, it may be worth a try. And just follow the instructions about how to apply it. And you do wear a mask and you spray it on, but it's been very, very successful. And the virus kills the moth larva. So I thought that was pretty cool. Yeah, so these are varieties that are resistant or show resistance. So for the fire blight, there are some pears and one Asian pear, but there really aren't any apples yet. So if you do have apples, a lot of apples, then maybe consider that what is it called? The CYDX. Peach leaf curl, there's some options. And nectarine, there's an option. And for brown rot, there's not a lot, but hopefully you could just keep it in check by collecting the mummies. And then, oh, what was I saying? Oh, I'm sorry. Yeah, the fire blight. No apple resistant for fire blight is not going to do anything with that new stuff because that's only for moths. But then codling moth, just suggesting giving early ripening varieties. But I mean, you're still going to get some moths. It's just life. So aphids, I think we're all familiar with aphids. Try to hose them off. If you put too much nitrogen, too much fertilizer, you're going to get a lot of aphids because they're going to be really attracted to that new growth. So avoid doing that. Scale, this is scale. That's what that looks like. They're either really hard or they're kind of soft. And they can be on citrus. They can be on all kinds of trees, really, plum, anything. And they suck the sap. So they weaken the tree. The best thing to do is to make sure there's no ants, because the ants will kind of protect the scale by eating or killing anything that might try to eat the scale. So use ant traps around the base and see if you can get rid of the ants, and then the scale will often just die because it's not being tended by the ants anymore. and the natural insects will have a chance to do their thing. Okay, leaf-footed bug. Um, yeah, I don't see anything about spray. I don't remember anything about spray for them. But the leaf-footed bugs, they're really big. I mean, this is like pretty much real size almost. And that's a little bigger than what the nymphs look like. But they end up on your pomegranates, and these are a bunch on some berries that just were hatched. Uh, you can pick them and squish them. If you move your hand over them, they react to movement and drop. So if you have a bowl of or a glass of soapy water under them and move your hand up here, they'll just drop into the soapy water. You can also use one of these little vacuums. These are these kid vacuums for like science camp or whatever. And these are about $20, maybe 25. They're pretty fun, actually. I have one. And you can just vacuum up the insects. And then they have a little magnifying glass and a little net for breathing so that you can look at them, or then you can just dispose of them. Spotted wing Drosophila. This is a long time issue with cherries. It's where you get the worms. We call them worms. They're maggots in the cherries, in the strawberries, blueberries. They're disgusting. The thing with these is that they don't wait for the fruit to rot. They go ahead and they've got this proboscis, is that right? That's really strong and it can pierce the flesh of the fruit while it's still ripe. I mean, before it's gotten overripe, and they will lay some eggs in there, and they do that before the fruit's gone bad, which really is a bummer. Oops, what's happening? So the best thing about that is to deal with it is sanitation, is to just pick up the stuff because the larvae are inside the fruit. So if you're picking up all that gross fruit, you're getting rid of the larvae for next year. You can put like little fine netting around the fruit so that they can't get into it. If you do that early on, like when the fruit is like green to pink, when it's just starting to turn, that's before the little flies have injected their eggs in there. So you can do that. And if you do want to spray, you can. You have to use spinosad, but it does need quite a few applications, like 3 or 4 or something horrible. It's a lot of work. But there is also a biocontrol on the horizon for these guys. It is the Samba wasp that will parasitize the spotted wing Drosophila. So there is work being done to like the trials. So there's trials. These were in Maine. There's also trials now in Georgia and in North Carolina. A lot of them are looking at the blueberry industry because it affects that. And they're still doing more work, but I'm hoping that we'll have something kind of like with the Asian citrusillid, where we'll have something that can get rid of that. I think that's it. That's the end. That was awesome. That was really fast. So are there any questions?
Yes.
Okay.
When do you apply the CYDX?
Um, that one is, let's see, I read a bunch about it. I think I have it. Did I bookmark it? I don't think so. You apply it, it's very specific about when you apply it. If you Google it, there's really only, it's the same bottle everywhere. So whoever's they're marketing it, it's all the same thing. And it has a really clear information sheet that I was reading that has exactly like, do it at this time of day, do it under these conditions. This is how many times you have to do it. It does need a few applications. I don't remember if it said when. It's for the larva, and it actually has to be ingested by the larva. So there is a certain time period. So you would set traps to find out when in fact, the 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 flies are around, and then you calculate how many days after that, and that's when you do it. And then it says you do it this. So it's really specific. It spells it all out exactly how to apply it. Um, and then I read a blog from a guy who did follow all the instructions and did do it. And he said that the places where he applied it directly to the fruit, that was very successful. He has another tree where it was really hard for him to get to it because it's like along a fence line or something. And that one um, had much less codling moth, but it wasn't like zero. So he just that was his point. So I don't know, I don't recall is my answer. But definitely just Google it and it'll come up because it's kind of cool. And yeah.
Is the Samba wasp harmful to humans?
No, I don't think so. I think it just parasitizes it's very tiny. It's a tiny, tiny little wasp. It's not like a big, I think humans I don't think it could puncture our skin. Good question. I don't know exactly, but I doubt it. How's that?
That's all for the questions.
Okay. Awesome. Mike, did you have anything?
Uh, no, thank you, Bonnie. You got through that very well. Did
I'm impressed. That was the
yeah,
fastest I've ever done that. I skipped a
yeah,
lot, but I figure a lot of people, if you're watching this or you tune in, you kind of know a little bit about pruning cuts, a little bit about insects already, you know. So
yeah. So yeah, definitely good information. So thanks for coming, everyone. And next session, which is it's September 11th, Sue Fitz, who is a Yolo Master Gardener, will talk about uh, winter hardy annual flowers. So how to plant them. If you don't want to plant them, I'm sure she'll talk about varieties that are good to get at the local nursery. And I think, some annual flowers in the winter to brighten up a dreary winter day or maybe just the thing. So, and Sue is great. She is extremely knowledgeable about not only annual flowers, but many other things, many other topics too. So, be sure to catch that if you're interested. So, with that, thanks for coming, everybody. See you in a couple weeks. Thanks, Bonnie. Good job.
my
All right.
pleasure.
Yep.
Okay,
Thanks, everyone.
Thanks, everybody.
bye everybody.
Yep.
Bye.
Bye-bye.